She leaned close, her voice barely a breath against my ear, and whispered, "She doesn't have to know." From that moment, everything I thought I trusted began to tremble. I met her on an evening that should have felt ordinary. I was visiting my girlfriend, a woman who carried herself with a calm maturity that always grounded me. She had invited me to meet her family. A quiet dinner, she said, something simple. I had expected laughter, food, and maybe the usual awkward introductions. What I hadn't expected was her sister. She walked into the room with a confidence that seemed to shift the atmosphere. Both women were in their 40s, but they couldn't have been more different. My girlfriend carried elegance in her steadiness. Soft-spoken, poised, deliberate. Her sister, however, had an edge about her. Her eyes were sharp, her smile playfully teasing, as if she was already in on a secret I hadn't learned yet. The first thing I noticed wasn't her looks, though she was striking in her own right, but the way she watched. When she extended her hand to greet me, her fingers lingered a fraction longer than politeness required. Her perfume carried a subtle spice, something warmer, bolder, that hung in the air even after she pulled back. For a brief moment, I forgot how to steady my breathing. Dinner carried on in the way family dinners usually do. Small jokes, passing dishes around, overlapping conversations. My girlfriend leaned in close, her hand brushing mine under the table in reassurance, reminding me of the reason I was there. But every so often, when I lifted my eyes, I found her sister looking at me. Not in a casual way. Not in the distracted glances you give someone across a table. This was different. Her gaze held me for a second too long, and when I caught her, she didn't look away quickly as most people would. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the corner of her lips curving into a smile that seemed to say, "I see you." I tried to push it from my mind, convincing myself it was nothing more than my imagination. After all, people watch. People smile. But the weight of her attention was undeniable, like a current beneath the surface of calm waters. Later, when I helped clear the table, she brushed past me in the narrow kitchen doorway. The touch was innocent enough. A shoulder against mine, a soft graze of her hand as she squeezed by. Yet it sent a strange pulse through me, and when she glanced back with that same knowing smile, I felt the air tighten around us. I told myself not to think too much of it. She was my girlfriend's sister, after all. But as the night went on, her presence kept pulling at the edges of my focus, like a song you can't quite get out of your head. That first meeting wasn't long. Just a dinner. Just introductions. Yet by the time I left, I carried the unsettling awareness that something had shifted. I had stepped into her gaze, and some part of me wasn't sure I wanted to step out. The following weeks brought more dinners, more casual gatherings. It felt natural. My girlfriend enjoyed having me around, and her family, for the most part, welcomed me warmly. Yet every time I saw her sister, the atmosphere carried that same subtle charge. She had a way of making small talk feel like something heavier. When she spoke, it wasn't just words exchanged across a room. It was as though she was pulling me into her orbit. We'd end up side by side at the counter while preparing food, or seated across from each other at the dining table. She'd toss me questions that seemed ordinary at first. "How's work treating you?" Or "Do you like this wine?" But the way she listened made my answers feel more significant than they were. Her eyes rarely left mine when I spoke. Most people glance away, nod, break eye contact. She didn't. She held it, steady and unflinching, until I felt my throat dry and my voice falter. There was something in that gaze. Bold but not unkind, mischievous but not cruel. It was as though she was searching for something beneath the surface, testing how much I'd let her see. Little gestures began to stand out more than they should have. When she passed me a dish, her fingers brushed against mine a little too deliberately. When she laughed, she leaned in close, her shoulder grazing mine as if by accident. Yet her pause before pulling back said otherwise. I could feel my pulse quicken at the smallest contact, which only made me more frustrated with myself. One night, the family gathered in the living room after dinner. Conversations drifted lazily as everyone settled into couches and armchairs. My girlfriend sat beside me, her hand resting gently on my knee, grounding me with her familiar touch. Across the room, her sister sat angled toward me, chin propped on her hand, eyes never straying far from where I was. I felt heat rise in my chest at the thought of being seen in such a way, especially with my girlfriend so close. At one point, I caught her sister smirking. It wasn't an obvious grin, more like a flicker of amusement tugging at the corner of her lips, as though she knew exactly what effect she was having on me. She didn't need words. That look was enough. Later, when everyone began saying their goodnights, I felt her presence again in the narrow hallway. She stepped aside to let me pass, but not without leaning just close enough that her whisper of perfume followed me, clinging to the air even after I had walked by. I could almost feel her smile against the back of my neck, though she hadn't said a word. By the time I left that evening, my thoughts were tangled. I told myself it was nothing, just playfulness, maybe even coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. She was drawing lines in the air between us, invisible, unspoken, and I was already walking dangerously close to them. It happened on a night that felt quieter than the rest. The house had settled into its usual rhythm after dinner. Soft conversations fading, dishes stacked, the hum of the television in the background. One by one, people excused themselves. My girlfriend had gone upstairs early, tired from the long day. That left me in the kitchen, rinsing glasses under the muted glow of the overhead light. I thought I was alone. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the trickle of water, the faint clink of glass. It was almost calming. Then I felt her before I saw her. A presence in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "You don't have to do the dishes, you know," she said, her voice low, threaded with a kind of casual amusement. I glanced over my shoulder. She was standing there, arms folded, her expression unreadable. "Just helping out," I replied, my tone steady, though I felt a flicker of nerves. She stepped closer, her heels soft against the tiled floor. The faint spice of her perfume drifted toward me, subtle but unmistakable. She reached past me to set a stray glass on the counter, and for a moment her arm brushed mine. The touch was fleeting, accidental, but it lingered all the same. I tried to focus on the glass in my hand, on the water swirling down the drain, but her nearness was impossible to ignore. She leaned in, her voice dropping lower, softer. So soft it felt like it was meant only for me. "She doesn't have to know." The words landed with the force of something I didn't have language for. My breath caught. The glass nearly slipped from my hand. I turned to look at her, and she was already watching me. Not with mockery or cruelty, but with a daring kind of certainty. Her lips curved ever so slightly, as though she was testing me, daring me to challenge what she'd just said. In that moment, the kitchen felt too small, the air too heavy. My chest tightened as though my body couldn't decide whether to lean toward her or step back. I wanted to ask her what she meant, to push the words back at her, but I couldn't, because I knew exactly what she meant. 1,000 thoughts fired through me in an instant. Loyalty, guilt, confusion, desire. I thought of my girlfriend asleep upstairs, trusting me. I thought of this woman beside me, her sister, looking at me with eyes that seemed to strip away every layer of hesitation. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. The whisper hung between us, echoing louder than any shouted confession could have. And when she finally turned away, brushing my arm one last time as she left the kitchen, I stood frozen. The glass still in my hand, my heart pounding as though I had just run a mile. That night, when I finally lay down beside my girlfriend, I couldn't shake it. Her sister's voice replayed again and again, a haunting refrain. "She doesn't have to know." It was a sentence that couldn't be unsaid, and I knew, deep down, that nothing between us would ever feel the same again. After that night in the kitchen, everything felt different. Even when we were surrounded by others, I felt her presence as though she had marked me with her words. I couldn't unhear them. I couldn't forget the way her breath had brushed my ear, the certainty in her tone. And she knew it. In the days that followed, she began to linger closer. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but just enough that I couldn't ignore it. At family dinners, she chose the seat across from me, her knee angled just slightly toward mine. When I stood at the counter preparing food, she drifted near, close enough that the heat of her arm grazed against me. It was never overt, always subtle, always deniable, but each touch, each glance, felt like a match struck too close to kindling. I remember one particular afternoon. The house was filled with soft chatter, a low hum of conversation, and yet all I could focus on was her. She stood behind me as I chopped vegetables, reaching past me to grab a knife from the drawer. The brush of her sleeve against mine, the way her shoulder almost pressed to my back. It sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Careful," she said, her tone light, almost teasing, as her hand briefly touched mine to steady it on the cutting board. The contact lasted only a second, but it burned long after she pulled away. I caught her looking at me often, not openly, not brazenly, but in the quiet way someone memorizes details. Her eyes would wander to my hands, to the curve of my jaw, then back to her glass of wine as if nothing had happened. And when our gazes locked by accident, she didn't flinch or glance away. She held it, calm and daring, until I was the one who had to look down. It was maddening because beneath it all, I knew she was waiting. Waiting for me to step closer. Waiting for me to prove that her whisper had planted its roots inside me. One evening, the family gathered in the living room to watch a movie. She slipped onto the couch beside me, the distance between us narrowing until her thigh brushed mine. I felt every shift of her body, the warmth seeping through fabric, the faint rhythm of her breathing when she leaned back. My girlfriend sat on the armchair across the room, completely unaware. I couldn't focus on the screen. My heart was caught in a war. Loyalty on one side, temptation on the other. And yet I didn't move away. Her hand rested casually on the cushion. Her fingers splayed just close enough that I could feel the gravity of them. I didn't take it, couldn't, but the thought alone was enough to make my pulse race. That was the cruelest part. She didn't have to touch me. She didn't have to speak. All she had to do was be there, close enough to remind me that a single step could shatter everything. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to convince myself that I wouldn't take that step. The night it happened was cool, the kind of evening that makes you pull your jacket tighter without realizing it. We just wrapped up another family gathering. Plates cleared, laughter still echoing faintly in the walls. One by one, people drifted upstairs or out the door. My girlfriend excused herself early, saying she had work in the morning. I told her I'd follow soon, but I didn't move right away. Her sister noticed. She slipped outside before me, and when I eventually stepped onto the porch, she was already there, leaning against the railing with a glass in her hand. The porch light cast her face in soft gold, shadows deepening the sharpness of her features. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she looked like she had been waiting. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her tone quiet, almost playful. I shook my head. "Just needed some air." She gestured toward the path that wound away from the house. "Walk with me." I should have said no. Every reasonable part of me screamed to decline, to retreat upstairs to where safety and loyalty lay waiting. But my feet moved before my mind could protest. I followed her down the steps, gravel crunching softly underfoot, the night air crisp against my skin. We walked side by side in silence at first. The world felt muted. Only the hum of insects, the distant rustle of leaves in the breeze. The distance between our hands was small, almost nothing, yet it felt like an entire conversation lived in that space. Halfway down the street, she slowed, then reached for my hand. Not playfully, not teasingly. She slid her fingers against mine with intention, her palm warm, her grip firm. I froze. My instinct was to pull away, but I couldn't. My pulse pounded in my ears, louder than the night itself. "You're trembling?" she whispered, her eyes catching the faint glow of the streetlight above us. I forced a laugh, though it came out unsteady. "Because I know this is wrong." Her smile was small, almost sad. "Maybe, but it feels real, doesn't it?" We stopped walking, the two of us standing under the pale circle of light, shadows stretching long behind us. She turned to face me fully, her expression open, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. There was no smirk, no playful edge, just raw honesty. Her free hand lifted slightly, brushing against my sleeve, a touch so delicate it barely registered, yet it sent a current racing through me. I could feel the question hanging between us, unspoken, undeniable. I didn't kiss her. She didn't kiss me. But in that suspended moment, standing beneath the quiet night sky, it felt as though we already had. The closeness, the confession in her eyes, the silence heavy with everything we weren't saying. It was a line crossed all the same. When we finally turned back toward the house, her hand still in mine, I knew there was no going back to the way things had been. Something had shifted permanently, and whether it was fragile or dangerous, I had already chosen to carry it with me. That night, after we slipped quietly back into the house, I thought it was over, that we'd retreat to our separate corners and pretend nothing had happened. But she lingered. Instead of heading upstairs, she poured herself another glass of wine and settled into the dim glow of the living room lamp. I should have left. I should have followed my girlfriend, shut my eyes, and forced myself into sleep. But something about the way she sat there, shoulders slightly hunched, her glass turning slowly in her hands, pulled me back. "You're not going up?" I asked softly, leaning against the doorway. She glanced up, her lips curving into a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Not yet. Sit with me." I hesitated, then crossed the room, lowering myself onto the couch beside her. The space between us was small, but not charged the way it had been outside. This felt different, heavier. For a while she didn't speak, just sipped her wine, staring at some invisible point across the room. Then, finally, she set the glass down and let out a slow breath. "You know," she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it, "my sister's always been the steady one, the one people trust, the one who lasts." I stayed silent, sensing she wasn't looking for an answer. Her eyes flicked toward me, soft but tired. "Me? I've always been the reckless one, the one people roll their eyes at, the one who doesn't stick. Even as kids, that's how it was. She was the favorite, the careful one. I was everything she wasn't." Her words cracked slightly, and she pressed her fingers against her temple, as though embarrassed by her own confession. I tell myself I don't care, that I like living in the moment. But sometimes it's exhausting, being the one no one expects to stay. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. She wasn't teasing now. There was no smirk, no sly glance, just a woman unraveling, piece by piece, in front of me. "I didn't mean to," she started, then stopped, her voice faltering. She shook her head, biting her lip. "When I whispered that to you in the kitchen, it wasn't about stealing something from her. It was about feeling like I could matter to someone. Like maybe, for once, I wouldn't be the shadow." Her hand found mine then, not with boldness but with desperation. Her grip was firm, her fingers trembling faintly. I felt her vulnerability through the touch, the way she clung, not as someone trying to seduce, but as someone terrified of being unseen. I turned my palm upward, threading my fingers through hers, and for a moment, the air stilled. I didn't know what future waited for us, or if there even could be one. But in that fragile silence, I understood one thing. Beneath her daring and her whispers was a loneliness that had been waiting years to be heard. And somehow she had chosen me to hear it. The hours after her confession stretched long and heavy, as though time itself had slowed to listen. We sat together on the couch, her hand in mine, the silence between us carrying the weight of everything we couldn't say aloud. The house was quiet, shadows softening the edges of the room, and I knew we were standing at the edge of something irreversible. She leaned back, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as if answers might be written there. "You probably think I'm a terrible person," she murmured. I shook my head. "I think you're honest. Maybe too honest for your own good." That made her laugh, but it was faint, bittersweet. She turned her head to look at me then, and in her gaze I saw both the daring woman who had whispered temptation into my ear and the vulnerable one who had admitted to being tired of shadows. Both truths lived in her, and I couldn't separate them. For a moment, it felt like the world had drawn us into a private cocoon. Her knee brushed mine, Her fingers tightened around my hand, and she leaned just close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath. The question in her eyes was unmistakable. Are you going to choose this? Choose me? I thought of my girlfriend upstairs. Steady, trusting, unsuspecting. I thought of the sister beside me, her heart cracked open, desperate to be seen. My chest ached with the weight of both. Finally, I let out a slow breath. I can't betray her, I said softly, the words tasting like glass in my mouth. But that doesn't mean what you told me isn't real. It is. I felt it too. Her eyes closed, a single tear slipping down her cheek before she could catch it. I reached out instinctively, brushing it away with the back of my finger. She leaned into the touch for the briefest moment, her lips trembling as though she might kiss my hand. But she didn't. She pulled back, her composure breaking into something raw. You'll forget me, she whispered, her voice frayed. Never, I said, my throat tight. This will stay with me. Always. We sat there for a long while, not lovers, not strangers. Something in between, something that defied a name. When she finally stood, she pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. It wasn't seduction, it wasn't triumph. It was a goodbye disguised as tenderness. Thank you, she murmured, for seeing me. And then she was gone, slipping quietly into the night, leaving the faint scent of her perfume in the air and a hollow space beside me on the couch. I lay awake for hours after, my girlfriend breathing steadily beside me, unaware of the storm I carried inside. We would go on, she and I, as though nothing had happened. But I knew better. Some connections don't need to last a lifetime to change you. Her sister's whisper had altered the shape of my heart forever. And even in silence, even in separation, I would never be the same again. If this story left you thinking about the choices we make in love and the secrets we carry, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories that dive deep into forbidden emotions, quiet betrayals, and the moments that change us forever, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.